Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to take two of another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by CrowCast. Apologies to those of you who experienced that little snafu. For those who are listening on demand, we had a bit of a false start. So we're back again, and joining me is Macca and Nikki. How you going, guys?
Same as I was last time. Very good, thank you.
I'm pretty good too.
How are we all sounding on the chat? All good now, guys? Fantastic.
Yay, crystal clear. Yay.
And in answer to Vardy, no, that's not Macca on guitar. He wishes it was Macca on guitar. But if I told you who it was on guitar, you'd think I was full of shit. So we'll just leave the guitar person as a mystery guest. Yeah, it was me. Anyway...
I was just gave Mrs. Macca the guitar now. It's out the way.
It's out the way now. As long as she's not doing the dishes, Macca, that's the main thing. I mean, let's be honest.
Oh, no, let her off with the takeaway tonight.
Very good. All right, look, let's get right into the scores roundup, shall we?
Sure.
All right. What a round of footy it has been, actually. It's been a fantastic round of footy for the most part. Some really good games. Starting on Friday night, Richmond over Geelong. In the end, by 3 points. The Little Master failing to give Geelong the match. And Richmond getting up 85-82. Was a pretty good game to watch, I thought.
Yeah, it was a very good game to watch. But I agree with Dermot Burton. He indicated that he thought that Ablett piked it because if he had have straightened up for the shot for goal, which he had time for, he would have got flattened after he kicked the ball. And he reckons he's hooked it deliberately so to make sure he didn't get bumped into. And whether that's true or whether it's not, I thought it was a very, very bad miss for a guy of Abbott's calibre. And I will say this, he doesn't go in too hard with the ball these days.
It was really hard towards the end because I'm like, I don't like either of you. I don't know who I want to actually win. But yeah, it was a great game to watch.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Well, yeah. I was about actually barracking for Geelong, much as I resent certain parts about Geelong. But Richmond, I just think, are given too many favours by the AFL with their 193 games in a row or something at the MCG. It's about time that they should be sent travelling about 6 times a year, I reckon. I mean,
well, if they've got all those extra fans they now have, pretty sure they're around the country, and shouldn't they get to? They deserve to see their team play elsewhere.
All those one-game members.
Yeah, those ones.
But we have to go to bloody Alice Springs, and now we're going to Canberra. And Richmond just sit there on the MCG every week.
Well, look, you know, it is what it is, and we can't complain, but it was a good game, and Richmond staying on top of the ladder, 85-82. On Saturday, we had another great game, Hawthorn over Essendon, the old rivals there, and Essendon looking pretty likely for most of it, but Hawthorn getting up by 4 points in the end, 107-103, and just quietly building Hawthorn, I reckon.
Well, yes, they are, but Essendon, I love the way they play. Well, they're very kamikaze, but they do give you a chance, and Hawthorn had the skills to take their opportunities and win the game, and another good game to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Did you see it, Nick?
No, I was at a wedding.
Your own?
No.
Did you get me? Is there something you need to tell us?
No. But if I was getting married, I would have it on a day that there's a freaking showdown.
Well, I mean, seriously, you've got to question your friends at this point, don't you?
They know nothing about football, and it's only because I love her I would give up a football game to her, and one that was that amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, before we get there, obviously we've got some other games. North Melbourne, another close one, 3 points over Brisbane, and Cam Rayner doing an Ollie Wines there towards the end, and North getting up in a very, very tight one at the Gabba.
Yeah, and The young,
Bastards, I tip Brisbane.
the young lad will learn from that. But the point, there's too much of this hooking around the corner because you've actually. I know it's an excellent kick when you're on an acute angle, but why the hell he or Wines for that matter, when they're virtually straight out in front, would choose to do that kick? I just don't know. And in each case, they've cost their team the game.
I wonder if it's because when you do get a chance to do some goal kicking practice, etc., because there's not too much, or even if you're out with your mates, do you practice kicking out in front, or do you all try and challenge yourself to have snap goals? So I reckon they're actually doing that snap practice a lot more instead of actually running straight at the goals or aiming for the centre of the goal.
One of the commentators did raise that point. It's probably habit these days because they do spend a lot more time practicing those type of kicks rather than straight kicks in front of goal.
Well, I heard a little story from an unnamed source who suggested that the sports science has infiltrated AFL training regimes to the extent that a lot of clubs are utilising foot sensors in their boots, and there's one club in particular who doesn't like their players having more than 20 kicks in a training session.
20 I did hear that.
20 kicks in a training session.
Ooh.
Now, are we training for the Olympics or are we training for AFL football? Because last time I looked, kicking and the skill of kicking, the art of
kind
kicking
of integral?
Is integral to the game, absolutely. Blokes like Malcolm Blight would be turning in their graves. Sorry, Malcolm, you're not gone yet, but you know what I mean. Like 20 kicks.
Idea of that.
20 kicks of training. You'd have 20 kicks in the kick to kick during the warm up, wouldn't you? What the hell?
Yeah, you would.
You should do.
So yeah, very interesting, and I think it actually shows. Some of the shots a goal on Saturday afternoon in our game were horrific. But anyway, move on. St Kilda really not looking at all in the game at any point against Western Bulldogs. So the Doggies getting up in the end 103-68 at Etihad on Saturday evening.
I think St Kilda actually jumped them early. We got out to about a 2 or 3 goal lead, but that was it. And then it made the Bulldogs look good after that.
Bastards, I thought St Kilda were a chance. They were like my little roughie. This tipping round didn't work.
They still say Kilda, though. Nikki, they still say Kilda.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of skills, St Kilda. They just seem to lack talent.
Which is ridiculous for such top-line draft talent they have.
It's the type of players they pick, though.
Yeah, I think that's true. But also, I'd be looking for a different coach, I would.
The other Saturday night game, and you could be right, Macca, that could be on the cards at season's end. The other Saturday night game was also a belter. Sydney getting up and keeping their season alive over Collingwood, 73-71 at the SCG.
A beauty, absolute beauty to watch this one. And full credit to Collingwood because with the injuries they've had and injuries they also received during the game. Yeah, I thought they were in major problems, but they've got a lot more fight and spirit about them now, and I think Buckley's got them working as a unit. And if it wasn't for Buddy turning on a real Buddy special, Collingwood would have won the game. But Buddy's pulled one out of the arc. I think it was a beauty.
Out of the 4 games on Saturday, I only got one right, and it wasn't that one.
Congrats! You got one this time, Nikki.
Hey, I've actually been doing not too bad in tipping, but okay. I thought Sydney have actually been not so good at home, and Collingwood they've actually been a pleasure to watch. I thought they would get over the top of them.
Look, I think injuries might hamper Collingwood's push for a flag this season, but they're certainly on the rise, and credit to Peter J, our Tuesday night offsider, who tipped them at the beginning of the season to really rise up the ladder, and he had it spot on. But Sydney winning doesn't really do us any favours in terms of our slim finals hopes, but we'll get to that
No, I was vouching for Collingwood for that reason. But
look, today GWS belted Carlton 151-46, and GWS I think are emerging as Richmond's main challenger.
We get to play them in the freezing cold.
Yep. Why are we going to bloody Canberra? I do not know, and I'm pretty angry about that. But I watched that particular game because I love watching the skills of GWS. You know, Kelly, Caniglio, these Whitfield. These are real masters, and they've got pace. They've got skills. Kelly, but they call Sean Berger and Silk. This guy's Silk Plus. He's just incredible footballer, and he's so smooth. Either foot doesn't matter. I just love them as a footballer, and I really like watching them. And if we're not going to go any good, I'd like to see them win the flag.
Yeah, I think I would too. I think they present far better as a football team and probably as a football club out of the two expansion teams, in my opinion. And I think they've done their time, and in our absence, I wouldn't have any problems with GWS getting their maiden flag this year. And it's not going to be easy because they're going to have to win games at the MCG, which has been problematic for them. But barring any unforeseen injuries, I think they're going to be right amongst it. The second last game today, Melbourne thumping the Gold Coast. Gold Coast, since their upset win a couple of weeks ago, that was basically it for them. They've pulled up stumps, I think. They've got a very challenging off-season ahead of them, Gold Coast, with Lynch confirmed going, and Stephen May still up in the air, and I wouldn't mind betting he nicks off as well, to be perfectly honest. I think that might be one of the reasons why they gave Jared Witts the captaincy. Yeah,
I sort of watched the game. It was men against boys. It wasn't really a contest. I don't know what the future of the Gold Coast is, and I can't see what it's going to be. I don't know how you can even rescue it, as you said, because I think May will probably piss off as well, and they just got dragged from other clubs and other blokes who aren't good enough there. Because anybody who's any good gets out of there.
And the fact that they were throwing money at him to try and keep him, and and he's been there at the start, and he has been fairly loyal, to a point. They've got a good coach in this year, but he's just like, nah, I'm out of here. It's just quite seriously, fold that team up. Just fold it up.
Nicky, it'd be the sensible thing to do.
Well, there's not many teams that have come out of Gold Coast in any code that have done really well.
I don't think any have worked up there, have they?
Well, I mean, rugby league, you've got the Titans that are probably going okay, but in terms of soccer and other teams, and even rugby league has been a struggle out of the Gold Coast. I don't see the point. I don't see Queensland as being a big enough potential market for AFL football. I can see why the AFL wanted to get into New South Wales, because it is just such a big market and massive in terms of media as well. But Brisbane doesn't, or Queensland doesn't really present the same opportunities. And I think what they did with implementing the Gold Coast was not only create a half-assed team, but they also severely undermined Brisbane. And Brisbane, aside from their golden years in the early 2000s, they haven't exactly been, freewheeling it either. They've had to struggle, and they've lost players. And I think they'd be better off making sure that the Lions are really strong rather than trying to get two teams going up there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the thing is that where they do have that growth in strength in terms of numbers, etc., is actually in the women's league, not in the men's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll abandon Gold Coast. I think they will absolutely throw money at Gold Coast, and it will continue to undermine the competition in terms of inequity. They've got the academy up there that I think that they're probably hoping will feed good players into that team. But really, it's a very long game they're playing with that club, and I don't know whether the competition can sustain it for too much longer. Anyway, and the last game recently finished, West Coast comfortably getting up over Fremantle by 58 points, 142-84 in West Coast's favour.
Yeah, well, the talking point in this game, of course, is not the game itself. I was watching the game, and then in the background I saw Gaff and young Brayshaw going sort of hoppo-bumpo, having a little word or two to each other. And then Gaff unleashes a left straight jab whack into the mouth of Brayshaw and poleaxes him. He goes down, and it looked like he was out to it virtually. And, of course, after that, then it became pretty rough out there, and to the point when the coach eventually had to take Gaff off because they were trying to kill him. It was really almost a reversion back about 20 years to what happened after that, just for a very brief period. And afterwards, when Gaff was sitting down on the bench, he went to water because he realised what he'd done, because it's so far out of character for him, and he was actually crying at one stage there sitting on the bench. And to Simpson's credit, he came down and sat alongside him and talked to him, and obviously telling him that, we need you to pull yourself together, blah, blah, blah. It's too late now. It's all been done. And when he went back out there again, he got absolutely cleaned up by two of the Freo players, and I think they should be reported for charging. But coming back to Gav, I think you can see about probably a 6-weeker there.
Not good. Mackie, you could probably turn your mic up just a fraction, and at the same time apologise for Hoppo Bumpo. What the hell is that, Hoppo Bumpo?
Well, when you just sort of, like when they two little bantams just jumping into each other all the time.
Hoppo Bumpo?
Yeah.
Come on, mate. You're better than that. Anyway, look, without further ado...
Maybe I'm not.
Let's get into the Crows v Power game, shall we? Because it was an absolute classic. And the only thing ugly about the game was JJ's goal, probably.
Get ugly. Damn, that's ugly.
That's in reference to Kenny's presser, I reckon.
Yeah, I didn't think it was an ugly goal at all.
Well, for a start, it wasn't a goal, so... No, look, it was a fantastic game of football, an absolute classic, and despite the controversy to the end, we wouldn't have been stiff to lose it, but by hell, it would have been an opportunity lost given the amount of ball we had and the dominance in the stats that we had for the majority of the game. Adelaide getting up in the end by 3 points, 13 goals, 96. That's 31 scoring shots to Port Adelaide, 14 goals, 9, 93, 23 scoring shots. So 8 more scoring shots. And as we'll see in a moment, we dominated possession and dominated most of the stats. We just were untidy.
I think there was a lot of pressure out of there, and there were players who were rushing kicks on both sides because the heat was on from the start, and particularly from us, very much in their face, etc. But because of that notion of how you're putting that heat on, it was kind of thought that there was pressure coming for you even then there wasn't. So I think that's where a lot of it came, and a few people who are at the ground, I've read some of the people's recaps, etc., is that the wind was very tricky. So anything that was going up in the air towards the cathedral end, it was like, this might go, this might not.
Port kicked 14 goals, 9. Didn't seem to worry them.
No.
Yeah, but how close to goal were they for most of them?
But Nikki,
Come on, Nikki.
The thing is, we do miss a lot of.
You're at a wedding.
Oh, we do. I was at a wedding.
And at the moment, I've been saying it for weeks. Eddie's got the yips when it comes to a set shot, and he just can't kick a set shot at the moment. And he missed a very easy one, and then there was another one when he was 30 metres out, and he tried to pass it off. We as Felix said, we wasted the ball a lot, and
we did,
and we also wasted scoring opportunities a lot. And you're partly right about the assumed pressure that does exist all game because of the fact that that's the way it's been played. But if you have a look at the guys that have got real quality about them, they take that assumed pressure and they still perform. And that's the difference between the good players and the ones that make up the bottom end of the list. But it was an excellent game to watch. And Felix is quite right. We really should have probably, on the possessions of that we had by comparison, number of entries into our forward 50, we probably should have won by about 6 goals. But
5 to 6, we should have.
Yeah.
That number of points. When I looked at the scoreboard afterwards, I went, what do you mean 18 points? Come on.
Look, I think the biggest factor for mine coming out of the game is our desire. It makes you wonder why it is that it takes a showdown to bring out that extra 1% in our players, because that was desperation that was desperately needed last week against Melbourne. And whilst we show it in patches, that was the most sustained example of desire from our team, I think, all season, and and that's including the first showdown this year. Yes, we're still a mathematical chance, but by God, we could have done with that effort last week when we were more than just a sniff. But irrespective, you can't knock the players. They can only do what they can do on the day, and I felt like their desire, their ability to keep trying and keep plugging away, even when they were burning so much of the ball, was a huge positive. And I think once some structural issues were sorted out at half time and we stopped leaking goals over the back because we were pushed up so high down back, we kind of stemmed the flow a little bit from Port Adelaide. We were right in the hunt, but it was certainly a game of effort, and as a Crows fan, I guess that's really what you want to see every time you rock up to a game, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm like you. It's actually a criticism of the players that they will pull out such an effort for a showdown, but not for another game. It should be that type of effort every week.
Yeah, it makes a furphy of the whole, giving 110%, because as we all know, that's mathematically impossible, which means that the players themselves don't realise their ceiling or don't play to their ceiling. And I understand it's a long season and everyone has down games and form slumps and all the rest of it. But there were blokes that played what you would normally say is above themselves, but is obviously to their capacity yesterday afternoon. And that needs to be their benchmark for the remainder of this season and certainly next season. Because if they can play like that one week, they can play like that every week. And that's not a criticism, because you walk away from a game like that and you feel proud to be a Crows supporter, because by God they cracked in, and some of the youngsters like Colucci made some fantastic attacks on the ball at the death in the clutch, and it was fantastic to see. But you want the coach to be able to sit down on Monday review and go, all right, well, that's the benchmark. That's how we can play. And if we tidy up disposal and our forward entries and get our defensive structure a little bit more solid, there's no team in the competition that can beat us with that intensity.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. We just don't deliver that every week. But Duday, I thought he started a little bit wobbly, but as the game went on, he just got better and better and better. And Keith, I thought he was very good all day. And these are blokes that they're actually playing a game under finals pressure, and almost greater than finals pressure, because there's a lot of hatred in the game as well. And it's good for their development. And I think the three players we're talking about, they will really benefit from this particular game and the win as well. They realise it with extra effort what it means.
Yeah, quite a number, I think, of young lads. But we'll get to that, Macca. You know the format, so let's get into their head-to-head stats.
Can I just say one thing?
No. Yes.
Just one thing. On that whole thing about that lift and that pressure and everything else, I think the crowd also has a lot to do with that, because are we going to get up and make that noise for an opposition that isn't Port?
I think it's a really good point, Nikki. Really good point. We
do it against Richmond. We'll do it against Geelong because there's a nice little hatred there. But sometimes another team gets a run on, that crowd can get a little bit deflated. And just listening and watching that last quarter, just half an hour, well, almost half an hour before we went to it, you could just, that crowd noise, you could just hear and keep going and keep going. And I think that psychologically has a bit to do it as well, because it's such a cauldron noise that goes on in there. So I think that does have a little bit to do with it as well.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Nick. And, it's not having a crack at supporters. We had 50,000 rock up there. It was jam-packed. But, again, does the hatred for Port Adelaide supersede the desire to get the team over the line in a do-or-die game against Melbourne, for example? Where was that fever-pitch support when we needed to get the team over the line against Melbourne? And people love watching the Crows, and people love, the Crows are part of many people's lives, but it's probably worth remembering that we're there.
Weather that kind of held you back from cheering, and when you're stuck under a poncho.
Yeah, I know, but the players are out there.
Absolutely. They are, but we can't really clap too well, etc. Jump around because you're being pelted with rain.
Yeah, no, look, I understand, but the point stands, I think, that there are, as a supporter base, if it's not enough for us to support our club and to, clap politely, we need to recognise moments in the season as well. And Melbourne was a real moment in the season. That was really our last chance to make finals. And, the crowd can't estimate, supporters can't underestimate the importance. The players continually mention showdown crowds and how much it lifts them. And I'm sure it lifts Port Adelaide in their home showdowns as well. And it'd be great if we could even get, 95% of that at other games that have more significance.
Well, it's hard to argue with what you're saying. It'd be nice to be that fanatical every week, but I must admit I can turn into a rabid monster for a Port game.
Oh, we all can, Macca, but I mean, there's been 45 of them now. There's been 45 showdowns. The original. It actually surprises me because my impression is that the WA Derby is not quite as fervent as ours. I mean, they still have a fair crack at each other, but it's a unique set of circumstances in South Australia simply because Port Adelaide are an existing team that everyone's hated for 100 years, aside from Port Adelaide supporters. So it's a Carlton Collingwood situation, I guess. I don't know.
Hate their team at the moment.
Anyway, let's look at some head-to-head. We had more of the ball, 390 disposals to 327. We're a bit more handball happy than Port, probably a 1 to 1.5 ratio for us. Therefore, we took more marks, 95 to 81. Contested marks, we were slightly ahead, 19 to 16. Our uncontested possessions, where the hell am I? 223 to 183. So that again follows on from last week, and again there was a bit of a lift at times during the match when we were under the pump. It seems to me that when we're under the pump, we try to gain control of the game by maintaining possession, and our uncontested numbers go through the roof. But the problem is that if you haven't got your disposal efficiency up at that time, and if you're not transitioning the ball quickly when you do have control of the ball, then really you play into teams like Port's hands because they just sit behind the ball and wait.
They do, absolutely.
Tackling was really good, 70 to 52, and tackles inside 50 were a feature, 19 to 6, and I think a lot of those actually came in the first quarter. I was going to
ask those numbers.
Yeah, we were really in their faces. We didn't let them get a lot of clean ball in tight. It was only when they were able to break away and get us over the back that they were getting clean disposal. But there was a ton of pressure across our half-forward line, which is where the majority of the play seemed to sit. And you couldn't fault our players' intensity in that department. Source got pretty well out-rucked again by a lame Paddy Ryder, you got to say. I reckon Paddy was underdone.
But didn't they both have the same amount of hit-outs?
Hit-outs to advantage.
Yeah, it was exactly the same.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If they're winning more hit-outs in general, then generally speaking, it shows one ruckman's dominance over another, and we'll go into the individuals and have a look at that a bit closely in a moment. Frees were even, and the good thing about the free kick count, and surprisingly for a game of such high intensity, there's only 25 frees paid for the game, and yes, there were some contentious ones paid and missed, but I don't mind the umpires at least being consistent, and you either pay the first one, which is what I prefer, and your free kick count is quite high, or you put the whistle away. And I think the umpires decided to, by and large, put the whistle away, and for the most part, I felt that they were consistent.
Well,
they gave away an equal soft 50 to both sides.
Yeah,
Rosebery cancelled out Nichols. That was so good.
Yeah, it was like, dude, no. When I get a chance, I'll just make sure we'll leave them one up here.
I don't think Nichols is a fan of our team, though.
No, not really.
No.
Look, I think where we won it was in clearances and stoppage. We had 44 to 34 clearances, which was a marked improvement on last week. Around the stoppage, 29 to 22, and in the centre, we slightly shaded them 15 to 12, in spite of Riders' hit-out advantage. So that probably feeds into what you were saying, Nick. Rebound 50s, we were down 31 to 47, which I think is a reflection of what I was saying earlier, that the game was really played across our half-forward line. Inside 50s, 69 to 47. If you don't mind, we should have won by 10 goals. And what else have we got here that's worth talking about? Metres game, we're 500 metres up. Turnovers were even, intercepts were even. So that's really the tail of the tape in terms of the head-to-head stats. It probably points to just as a clearance and contested ball dominance leading to a win in the end, Macca.
Yep, but also it illustrates that we should have done better than we really did, because if you look at the disposals, the clearances, the inside 50s, the contested ball, the tackles, we are up by about 20 to 30% in all of those categories. And that's a fair amount of dominance, really. And the only thing that surprised me about the stats was that Port Adelaide, for some reason, didn't use 9 of this, which is 10% of their allowance. So you would have thought they would have been working at trying to, keep fresh legs on the ground. But
I don't think they have the stock, Macca.
Well, that might be the point. But really, we should. I think we. I keep saying we probably should have won by 5 to 6 goals with the opportunities we had. And Port Adelaide did play exactly the type of game you said, Phoenix. They sat back and had a lot of players back, waiting for us to kick the ball there, and then trying to kick goals on the burst the other way around. And as I said, better usage of the ball, we would have won by a lot more.
I was continually surprised by the commentators saying that Port had more class and we had more grunt, because that's not the way I perceived.
That's not what I saw.
No, Port were able to look a little bit more classy because of the way the game was played. But Hinckley has a real a negative style of game, and they rely on a couple of stars. They rely on Dixon hitting up, and they rely on Gray and Wingard to dive around and kick goals, and the rest of it is just basically British Bulldog from half back whenever they force a turnover, and just sheer outweighing numbers. And once we addressed that quarterback position in the second half, and we weren't leaking so much out the back, they started to find it more difficult to find avenues to goal. And if I was a Port fan, I don't know whether I'd be particularly excited about the way that Hinckley coaches them.
Well, I totally agree with you, because I don't think he's got too much imagination about his coaching at all.
Yeah,
but
they only kicked 5 goals after half time. I mean, granted, we kicked 6 goals 10 after half time. They kicked 5 goals 4, so 16 scoring shots to 16 scoring shots to 9 after half time. After a pretty bright first quarter from Port, kicking 5-3, same as us, and then 4-2 in the second. Once, as I said, once we stopped that over the back stuff and tightened up in that area, even when Tars went down, we still had that covered just structurally. They didn't have too many other avenues to go, really.
No, they didn't. then Robbie Gray, and who I don't think was the best on ground, and we'll talk about that later, but Robbie Gray did kick 4 goal, and because he has got a lot of talent, and without a player like him, well, it would have been, he had to virtually manufacture some of those goals with his own skill. Take him out of the game, and then I think it would have been an absolute thrashing.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, Lukey Brown had 19 touches, and we'll get to individuals in a moment, but, Gray got a couple over the back. He took one good mark against Brown in that pocket.
Yeah, it was a good one. Yeah.
And fair play. It was a good mark. But I'm with you, Mac. I didn't see him as best on ground, and to be honest with you, I think it's a cop-out from Hinckley that they don't play Gray in the middle. Now, whether that's because of his fitness, I'm not sure. But if I was a Port supporter, I'd be demanding to see Robbie Gray play more minutes in the midfield, because as much as he does kick your goals, and he's a bit of an Eddie of old when it comes to creating opportunities from nowhere, you got to be able to get the ball down there. And to me, they don't have enough class in their midfield. Once we shut Pollock down, I mean, David McKay was horrific on Pollock early, but once we shifted Knight onto a bit of a run with Pollock and shut him down a bit, they don't have a lot of run through their midfield, and their midfield isn't a running midfield. Rockcliffe, Ebert, Boak, they're all one and wines. There's not a lot of pace through there. Really, only Chad Wingard, and he doesn't play a lot of midfield minutes. So
he's playing the wrong game. He should be in high diving. He's a brilliant diver.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I think in the end, we actually had too much class in the midfield. And let's get to some individuals.
Clearances prove that.
Well, exactly right. But not only clearances. I think the manner in which we clear. I mean, let's look at some individuals. I mean, we had Bryce Gibbs on 29 touches, 22 kicks, and 7 handballs.
Should have got the nod. He was best on ground. 9
inside 50s, 4 clearances, 4 rebound 50s. Went at 76%, gained a 658 metres. Spent 82% time on ground. I felt like we played Bryce a lot better than last week, guys. I felt like the disparity between his forward numbers, minutes, and his midfield minutes was too skewed to the forward line last week, whereas I think it was flipped this week, and he was instrumental in that second half.
Absolutely. You got it right spot on. Last week he was wasted, and this week he was used appropriately.
And who was back in the team, which I think has caused a bit of a difference there? Ellis Yeoman.
Yeah.
He did well, but to me, Gibbs, I cannot believe Gibbs did not get the medal. He was easily the best on ground. And I thought Robbie Gray's also, well, I don't know what the word is for it, but I thought he looked very, very classless the way he treated the medal after he got presented it.
Yeah, I think Gray is a fantastic player. I really do. But I think his attitude and blokes like Wingard and Westhoff and those blokes that just dive around, and I think it's indicative of a mindset at that club. Gray in another team would be an out-and-out champion. And I don't know...
Except Geelong.
Well, yeah, but...
He'd still be playing exactly the same way for free kicks if he was in a team like Geelong or Richmond. But put him in a team like us, that shit would not fly.
Yeah, well...
And that's the problem, is that he lets himself down by playing for those free kicks. And that last contest with Gallucci, the ball was there to be won. We were in front. They needed to win the ball. His way of winning that ball, with all of his football talent, is to try and play for a free.
Yeah, Westhoff did the same.
Yeah,
Westhoff did the same. And
it was just ridiculous.
No one will convince me that Robbie Gray didn't contribute to his concussion the other week.
Yep. I think we have actually said this about him previously, prior to that when we have discussed him, that he doesn't protect himself. In fact, he invites that kind
I
of
agree.
table, and he's going to hurt himself at some stage, and it happened, and he hasn't learned.
Actually, PJ Crows gets a nod for me for the comment of the night. Wingard plays for a free for holding. Where are we?
Come on, Mako.
Wingard pays for a holding free when he has the ball.
Yeah, it's actually called a tackle. Bryce was fantastic. I agree. I felt he was overall the most influential player on the night. Matty Crouch also 35 touches, 16 and 19, kicked a very critical goal towards the end there, 8 tackles as well, 7 inside, 57 clearances, 18 contested possessions, disposal efficiency a little bit down, and I felt like he burnt it early, but tidied that up as the game wore on and ended up with nearly 500 metres gained for us, 6 intercepts, and I felt like Matt worked himself into a little bit of 2017 form towards the back end of last night.
Yeah, I thought he had a very good game actually, and I thought he was the only logical challenger in my mind to Gibbs for best on ground, but I thought Gibbs was. But Crouchy played very well.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't really comment because I haven't seen the third quarter yet.
No, and he did. What did you think of his first half then in isolation, Nick? That'd be interesting.
It actually wasn't too bad because I've read a lot of the comments beforehand and everybody said how shite he was and how shite Smith was and how shite McKay was, and I'm watching the game going, they're actually doing some really nice stuff. I thought he actually wasn't too bad in that first half. The disposal needed to be cleaned up, but I think a lot of it, and he was fumbling ones where we know he's been a lot surer at taking those balls previously. And that was that whole perceived pressure, which I've talked about earlier, that I was noticing. And I think, obviously, once that tempo kind of settled down, those things didn't happen so much in the second half.
Yeah.
Is that more a reflection?
Yep, that's fair. Look, Rory Atkins, I felt, had his best game for the club probably ever. Maka.
Yep, I'm with you.
23 kicks, 6 handballs for 29 disposals, 11 marks, 5 tackles, 9 inside 50s, and probably the cleanest of all our, even probably cleaner than Bryce in terms of his efficiency in the forward 50. 3 rebound 50s as well. Went at nearly 70% disposal efficiency, 8 score involvements, 676 metres gained. Did turn it over a bit again early, but I felt another one too. Once the game came to them and they were sort of absorbing a bit more of that pressure and were able to be a bit more settled, I felt like we saw some of Rory's old composure.
Very good game. I agree with you. I think it's the best game he's played for the club.
Yeah. And that's what you want to see. I mean, it's probably... the game still was played a little bit on Rory's terms because whilst it was hard in the clinches, it wasn't the same sort of scrimmagey, scrambly game that Rory struggles in, like against, say, Sydney on a small ground. But I don't think Rory's the type of player that you can necessarily rely on in those games, but you just want him to stand up. And I felt like there were moments in the game that were high-pressure moments last night where he did stand up. And I didn't notice him squib anything. I didn't notice him making decisions to stay out of the play at any stage. And his disposal was really critical to our success in the end because he was spotting up targets really well.
Oh, no, he was
And there was always a Crows player on the lead right behind it. So they were actually going to be beautiful passes, and he was keeping them low. And because he's actually going for quite a bit of penetration with his kicks, it seemed to actually be a bit of a conscious decision for him to be trying to keep them a bit lower because of that wind.
Rat was one of the few.
That's what I'm guessing.
Rat and Gibbs were probably the two that were really lowering the eyes going into forward 50. Rat spotted up a couple of beauties. One off the right that I remember that he spotted up was particularly good. And there was a lot of bombing into our forward lines for not much gain, but when the ball got in Rat's hands or Bryce's hands, they tended to be dropping the eyes a bit and looking for that 30 to 35 metre out spot up, and it was far more effective, and I wish we were able to do a little bit more of that, but obviously Port flooding back made that a bit problematic.
Just on Gibbs, it's amazing how good players seem to have that little bit more time to get rid of the ball, and you're 100% right about what Gibbs was doing, and sometimes he would actually be looking at, he had one option, then he'd see a better option out the corner of his eye, change it to that one. So, I mean, I just think it's amazing how other players are always getting rushed, and yet the classy ones like Gibbs, they've got that little bit of time.
And it's time with the ball, but it's also their ability to take advantage of that extra split second with their vision, Macca, because you're right, they do. It's like an NFL quarterback. They're in the pocket and they've got, rushers coming at them, but they're able to spot 1, 2, 3, 4 options before they let the pass go. And in AFL footy, when you've got that sort of, Darren Jarman was obviously the classic where he seemed to have all the time in the world, and there's been a few others, but Gibbs is definitely one of those where you can actually see him ticking off options before he takes one. And I thought Atkins was very good in that department as well last night, that he was picking good options rather than... And he wasn't hanging onto the ball as much in close. He tends to hang onto the ball and get tackled, but we didn't see as much of that. He did a
nice fend-off.
Look, Sloaney's game, I thought, particularly in the first half, was exceptional, and then a couple of great moments late. He was getting worn by his nemesis, Ebert, all night, and I felt like he had the better of that contest. He was certainly more damaging than Ebert, I thought. 14 and 12 for 26 touches, 6 marks, kicked 2 goals, 1, 3 tackles, 4 inside 50s from Rory. Also 10 contested possessions, went at 73%, 9 score involvements, 4 intercept possessions. Probably Rory's best game for a little while, I thought.
Yeah, the stats they're very good stats for a guy that was tagged quite heavily by Ebert, and there's no doubt Sloan took the honours. He had 26 disposals, and Ebert only had 20, and I think that I don't know what Ebert's efficiency rating was, but I'd be sure that Sloan's was higher.
No, Ebert went at 80%, but I think that's because a lot of Ebert's possessions were in close. He had 15 handballs.
Yeah, tiny little handballs.
I don't know what his kicking efficiency was, Macca. I'm sorry, but you're probably right. He only gained 164 metres for the night, so that probably bears that out, what you're saying.
Yeah, he's a massive turnover by foot. He really is. I remember him in his West Coast days. He kicked the ball out of bounds on the full more than I've ever seen a player do. But,
it was very skinny ground, man. It was skinny ground.
Yeah, but
that is interesting. He's never had a good kick.
No, his old man was silk.
But coming back to Sloaney, though, honest to Sloaney, I thought if he could handle a tag like that every week, we'd be laughing.
Well, what we saw, Macca, I think, was Sloaney paying less attention to the tagger and more attention to the ball, which is what we've been calling for some weeks now. And I think the more Rory does that, and what we actually also saw from Sloaney is something that we haven't seen for bloody months, is getting out on the open on that outer wing or towards half forward and having a ping from the 50-metre line. When was the last time we saw Rory do that?
Yeah, I know.
It was fantastic to see him get out in the open and actually use his gut running to get free. So, no, great game from Rory, and good to see him back in a bit of touch. Wayne Miller just continues this upward trajectory off halfback, and I know that he turned it over a lot early and he fumbled early, but don't you love to see a young lad take the game on and try to be creative and not get... He's obviously been given licence by Don and the defensive coach to continue to have a crack. And to my way of thinking, the more he has a crack, he will eliminate those errors out of his game. And apart from a couple of fumbles early and a couple of turnovers, I thought he was fantastic. 14 and 8 for 22. Sorry, Mac. 4 marks, 4 tackles, 3 inside 50s, 6 rebound 50s, 9 contested possessions, went at 78%. Gained us 429 metres and 8 intercept possessions, and wow, what a springboard for us off halfback.
When you've got an individual like Wayne Miller who's got untapped talent and heaps of it, your point is very valid. even though they make a couple of boo-boos and might cost you goals early in the piece, you encourage them to keep doing it because they've got such great skills that it's like a McLeod. As they come good, they end up dominating. And I just thought, as this game went on, Miller had just got better and better, and in the end, he was a driving force from the back lines.
I think what really stands out to me is that kind of what you hinted at there earlier, Phoenix, is that whilst he makes those mistakes, he doesn't drop his head. He doesn't let those mistakes go, oh, I stuffed this up. I'm then get a bit scared to make that same mistake. He's like, I'll try it again. Let's see what happens. And that confidence to go, well, that one didn't work. I'll try and figure out why it didn't work and fix it for next time. But I'm going to do it again.
I think you're
right,
right, Nick.
I'm going to try and attack.
And not only that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, it's that confidence he has to be able to do that. That's a great growth as a player. And you can just see what he's going to be able to do, and it's going to be amazing.
Well,
yeah,
I think
agree.
The other thing that I've noticed with him this season, one of the criticisms last year that we had with Junior was that he didn't stay in the contest for long enough. But this season, you'll notice, even when he stuffs up, he's often the one that will be running through to make the tackle to try and win the ball back. So he's staying in the contest far longer. Even when he's made those errors, he's not dropping his head. And you get the impression that he is a bit of a confidence player, and he's obviously been given license to continue to try. And I think it augurs well for his future because he's now that he's built up some core strength and he's able to break those tackles and he's got the confidence to evade, he's going to be some player.
What I think is going to be a very sharp upward curve, and he's going to end up to be a real gun. And 2 years' time, he'll be a real gun.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is that I often hate if players are going in for the bump and when you should be tackling. But in that last section of the game where he put that bump on Boak, it was actually the right decision to make. The perfect. So choosing when to bump and when to tackle as well is quite a skill, and that was just executed to perfection.
Mm.
The interesting thing is, though, they're so head conscious these days, and quite rightly so. I mean, the average player, and I know I was good. When you bump, you actually in the old days you would before they brought the head being sacrosanct. You are actually trying to give the head a bit of a bang as well when you're doing it. And no, you were. It's quite honest if you're honest about it. No, if you're honest about it, you were.
I don't agree with that at all.
Macca was a dirty player.
He was a dirty player.
I did get rubbed out a bit.
They don't call him Elbows Macca for nothing.
No, but
the point is you are trying to shake someone up when you give them a bump. Absolutely.
Exactly. And you are trying to hurt them. But these days, I think what they brought is good. You can't hit the head, and I think, and Nicky's point's very valid. It takes a very skillful player not to hit the head, actually.
Mm. Yep. Well, it takes good execution. Look, speaking of stars, Tom today, 2 games back from his concussion, just continues to impress, and 21 touches, took 9 marks, including 14 intercept possessions, if you don't mind. Kicked goal as well, 2 tackles, 3 inside 50s, went at 95% disposal efficiency, if you don't mind. 11 contested possessions. I mean, the kid is just an out-and-out champ.
No argument for me.
I'm just going to sit here and grin and go, told you so.
Yeah.
Although I knew he was going to be good. I just didn't think he was going to be as consistently as good as he has been this season. I thought there would be a few little fluctuations because a younger player, but he did show that similar kind of consistency at SNFL level. But to take that step up and just perform like he's a 100-game player, he should be, whilst Rayner and Stevenson are great players as well, and they've done really well in their first year, they've still also shown some first-year player kind of, jitters in a way. And Tom, to be fair, he is that little bit older and he's had the season playing against senior bodies in the SNFL. but that composure is just phenomenal.
Look,
And his ability to think about the game is stunning.
Stevenson and Rayner are no doubt great players, but Stevenson plays as a small forward, and
Yes.
Rayner plays probably 50% forward and 50% mid. And to me, in terms of the importance to a team, Duday's role with us is far more important, and carries far more pressure
Yes,
than
and
either of those
I
two
think it is
lads.
actually harder.
Well, it
Because
particularly
of
with our
the-
game plan. You know, when we are pushing up high, he's often the last defender or finding himself one out, and often against a taller opponent. And you know, when we're doing comparisons between him and Jake Lever, the thing I think that Tom wins out over Jake is Tom's ability one out when he hasn't got that support. I think far exceeds Jake's one-on-one capabilities.
I agree with you. He certainly has.
Do you think Lever would ever stand on Dangerfield?
No, well, he wouldn't have the pace, let alone anything else. He wouldn't have the pace, you know.
And yet, who did we put on Dangerfield at times?
Cheney.
Today.
Well, I got to say,
No.
Nick.
I know.
Dude,
I'm
I
just
was on him a
teasing.
couple
I'm
of
just
times.
teasing you.
No, Nick, you know this is one for you, and I think you made a prediction for next year too.
Yeah,
Did
well,
I?
let's worry about that later.
All right.
Come on, mate.
Oh, I think I know. I'm not the only one. Peter.
Himmelberg.
Peter's also quite keen on. Yeah.
We're all quite keen on Himmelberg. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a good kid, that one.
Yeah. Hey, Ellis Yeoman, I felt was really good in tie, and you rightly pointed out earlier, Nicky, that I think he allows our midfield structure to be a little bit better with Bryce on the outside of the contest. 11 and 8 for 19, 5 marks, had 7 tackles, 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 8 contested possession, went 85% or 84.2% disposal efficiency. Gained us some nice metres, 355, which is sometimes the quibble with Ellis Yeoman. And I felt like the minutes that he played inside were really valuable at crucial moments. He has that capacity to stay strong over the ball and doesn't get beaten at the coalface very often when he's in the play.
I thought he added another dimension into the game as well, in the sense that he did a lot of the grunt work that Greenwood would normally do. And if I had it right, it looked to me like Greenwood was tagging Wines, and Wines had barely touched the ball in the first half in particular. And I thought at times that Greenwood was really riding him very, very hard indeed, but allowing Ellis Yeoman to do the hard work to get the ball.
The other thing I kind of noticed was you were talking about Gibbs and that little like balking and making the space, etc. Cam also seems to have that bit of ability. He just has that he can just do that little break in a little half circle to step back away from the contest, which leaves his opponent trying to chase him, but it gives him that space to make a decision. And he seems to be moving in slow motion, but the people chasing him don't seem to get quicker.
Yeah, I think the only knock on Ellis Yeoman in that respect, Nicky, is that I don't think he's quite as good a decision maker as he could be.
No.
But really, his go is to get in and under and get the ball out. And I felt like he, it's difficult because at times when we play all of Crouch, Greenwood and Yeoman, we look cumbersome and slow. And yet at other times, it seems to allow us more freedom on the outside. And it just makes you wonder whether it's the way the game is played or whether it's midfield structure. You'd have to really sit down and analyse each of those games where we've played those three lads. But I think what may help Cameron is the fact that we've discovered that Huey can actually play some really valuable forward minutes. And Cam Ellis Yeoman has also shown an ability to play forward at times. So whether that just adds into that rotation and allows room for both of them in the team, I'm not sure. But certainly on Saturday afternoon, he played an exceptional game, I thought.
I think where it is those when it's played well is when we're up against a midfield that doesn't have elite speed.
Yeah, that's exactly right,
and
Nick.
Port don't have that. And so That's one of those games. So we can go with them and we don't look as exposed.
Yeah, Brent on the chat makes that very comment. You wouldn't play CUI against GWS. Well, you're right. You certainly wouldn't play both of Cam Ellis-Yolman and Huey Greenwood in the same side against a side like GWS. So you're probably right. It's probably a horses for courses situation.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because we are playing GWS next week, and
he played well, and he deserves to be in the team again.
Yeah. I know, but they have a very quick midfield. So,
and again, it comes back to this the professionalism of AFL and how you run your squad. I mean, it should be no insult to Cam if he gets dropped for the GWS game, because we should be mature enough to be able to recognise that matchups matter, and Cam or Hugh should be grown up enough, and the coaching staff should be mature enough in their communications with lads that matchups do matter, and there are times when there's not room for two inside grunt players like both of them. And I think as AFL progresses and matures, we're going to see more of this squad management where, at times we might play 3 tools up forward or 4 tools, but at other times we might go small. And I think sometimes we actually do ourselves a disservice by picking players purely on form and without paying any sort of notice to what the opposition might bring.
Yeah, very good point. You really should be picking your team to win the matchups against your opposition, not just
or exploit
who's
them.
Been playing well in the past, and while that sounds cruel, it's all about winning, isn't it?
Yeah, and lots of other sports will do that. They will spread their roster, over the course of a season, and they'll look at certain teams and match up a certain way. Anyway, another lad who I thought has improved probably 25% this season. I thought Josh Jenkins had a fantastic game. 14-4, took 8 marks, which is, that's the number we want. Kicked 3 goals, 7 tackles as well, 3 inside 50s. Had 9 contested possessions. His disposal efficiency was down, but that's probably incumbent on that kind of a role. But I just felt like Josh was fantastic.
Well, you were very critical.
6 tackles inside 52.
You were quite correctly critical of him in the past. He was more like a big fat seagull hanging around for a chip now and again rather than going out getting the ball. But you just could not criticise him at the moment.
No.
The guy is just putting in effort, and really it must inspire the players around him, the effort that his big body, he's putting in with his big body, and that's exactly what you were asking for from him. And you're not coaching him privately, are you, mate?
No.
But he really has come good. He's actually doing all the things you would have liked him to do.
Well, he's done what he had to do, Macca. He has addressed elements of his game that he needed to address, and all credit to him for recognising his flaws and for taking on not criticism but direction from his coaches and whatnot, and analysing his own game and being self-aware enough to understand where he needs to improve. And I just feel like over the last 4 to 6 weeks he's become far more comfortable accepting contact and also initiating contact.
He's getting shitty about not getting the holding freeze, which
so he bloody ought to.
Oh.
But no, I think he is rising up the ranks of power forwards now, and the manner in which we fed the ball through him in the first half, and the way he was able to dictate the flow of traffic through strong leads and a couple of good one-on-ones in that match was really indicative of the way he's improved. And I as it stands right now, I have no problems with Josh Jenkins being in our best 22, and as I think I've mentioned a couple of times, I'd be thinking long and hard about whether we would be served making him our number 1 ruckman and bringing Elliot Himmelberg into the team.
Or even Hunter.
Hunter's Himmelberg's the one because he can play forward, Nick. I don't think Hunter is going to be as powerful up forward as Himmelberg potentially is.
No,
at the moment, yes. Elliot's still growing, which is a little bit of an issue.
He's going to be 9 foot up.
Oh, he's taller than Sauce. He's quite tall, but I think he's finally actually starting to widen out.
Mm.
So he's got the height, but he started to finally get stocky across the shoulders, which is good to see that he needs to fill out that little bit because I think he will get pushed around a bit too easily at AFL level with how fine he used to be. But he hasn't had a lot of exposure at rucking as probably what I'd like. He's had to for when we've had some injuries, and he wasn't too bad.
And he has to give 5 minutes chop out.
I do like what I think Hunter deserves a chance. I think he's played really well. He's done everything he should have in the SNFL.
Is he quick enough,
I would
Nicky?
love to see him get a chance at some stage.
Nicky, is he quick enough?
Yeah, Hunter's actually quite quick.
I don't disagree that Hunter deserves a chance.
He's very similar to Jenkins.
Yeah,
he plays very similar to Jenkins, so it'll be a really nice compliment.
I don't disagree that Hunter deserves a chance. I just don't know whether he fits into our team. And we're looking at the inevitable decline of Sam Jacobs over the next 12 to 18 months, in my opinion. And so some decisions are going to have to be made. And at the moment we've got Riley O'Brien, who seems to be Sam Mark II in the two, so more of the same. Or we've got Hunter in there, who's shown himself to be quite capable in the ruck. But when I look at Jenkins and his ability or his willingness now to get involved, and I just think to myself, well, we've got this lad in the twos, Elliot Himmelberg, who was a key post, who's essentially a Peter Wright, Tom Lynch kind of player, and I just wonder whether it's an opportunity, given that the comp is moving towards more agile ruckmen who can impact the play more around the ground, like Brodie Grundy, etc. That's a role that Josh Jenkins can play for us, and I just wonder whether it's worthwhile exploring giving him more minutes instead of just looking for a ready-made ruck replacement for Sam and getting more of the same.
Very good point you make. In the kind of game, I was focusing quite a bit on Grundy just to see what impact he did over the game. I just couldn't believe how much impact he does have on the game.
He's an extra midfielder, and he always has been. He's always played like an extra midfielder.
Yep. He does.
Anyway, a couple of others to go through. I thought Alex Keith was exceptional in
Loved
defence.
his game. Very good.
Composed.
Very composed, but also very aggressive in his ball movement. Went at 95% disposal efficiency, but he wasn't doing a Jake Kelly and kicking the ball backwards. He was being aggressive and positive with his ball movement. He had 6 and 12 for 18, took 3 marks, a couple of tackles, but 11 intercept possessions as well, 10 contested possessions, and as I mentioned, nearly 95% disposal efficiency. This is another situation, I reckon, where we have 3 very, very good key defenders, and we have the opportunity, rather than just discard one of them, like many just want to, Hardigan's no good, blah, blah, blah. I think there are times where the matchups can interchange, and Hardigan might be a better matchup than Keith or Talia, and vice versa. And it looks like Tars might be a bit sore now. So you'd imagine that Keith would play the remainder of the season, and Hardigan's not quite right yet. But having those 3 AFL experienced key defenders is a real plus, I think. And it's great to see Alex has come back after some real injury worries at the start of the year.
Yeah, I like the way Nicky said it, that he's so composed when he's got the ball. And, it was a pressure game where there wasn't a lot of time. But his usage of the ball just represents how composed the guy is. He just seems to have a very good vision to see opportunities to dispose of the ball, and then he has the skills to get it there.
He's very like Dustin Fletcher, because he's got those long, gangly arms that you kind of think, sometimes this guy's just going to fall over at any minute, and he shouldn't be able to move like that, and yet he can. He could just get that reach in to get that punch, or and he does read it as so well, as you said, Becca, and he can play up forward really nicely as well. We've had to do that, throw him up forward in the SNFL. He's a great lead, because people forget This is a guy who was a fast bowler. He's freaking quick.
Yeah. Lairdy, they sat on Rory, and I felt like he still had influence at times, despite, what was the name of the lad they had on him?
Darcy Byrne-Jones.
Yeah, Byrne-Jones, who I thought played pretty well.
He did.
Yeah, he played okay, but the thing is, okay, yeah, you took away that run that we get from Laird, but Miller picked up that slack.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've done that. We still had how many intercept marks between Keith and
25 between
Duday
Keith and Duday.
Instead of between Laird and Duday.
Well,
So
Laird
we
still had
covered
7.
it. And yet Lairdy still did some really integral stuff. He still did his great defensive work that he always does. It's like, okay, yeah, you tagged him and you didn't get all those possessions, but we had a system that was still getting that ball continuously forward into our forward line.
And my impression of Byrne-Jones is that he's a quality young kid, and to only get 7 touches out of him, probably robbing Peter to pay Paul when you consider Laird still had 18, still 4 inside 50s and 6 tackles and, 7 intercept possessions. So they certainly quelled Rory's normal output. But what was it worth in the end to them? I don't think it was really worth the experiment, and I think that's probably my criticism of the way Hinckley coaches. He's too defensive, and I understand the thought process behind sitting on Rory Laird, but if you're doing it at the expense of your own ball movement and your own attacking flair, then I think it's self-defeating.
Yeah.
The guy he used has been one of their better players, so yes.
And, the cream rises to the top. At the end of the game, we had Lairdy, and Lairdy put on a spoil and then a fantastic smother at the death there to stop Port going forward in that last minute or so. We had Jordan Gallucci, who we haven't spoken about yet, making some desperate attacks on the ball and really standing up tough. I mean, when you've got a bloke sitting on Laird, where was Byrne-Jones when Laird was doing those things? He's out. Byrne-Jones is out of the play. He's not adding any value at all. So it kind of defeats the purpose, in my view, to sit on a guy like Laird, because he's still going to do those inspirational things. Pardon me. Huey Greenwood, I think, was very much like Ellis Yeoman in terms of our assessment. Had 17 touches, 4 marks, kicked goals, 6 tackles, 11 contested possessions, went at 76% disposal efficiency, 250 metres gained. Spent a bit more time on the ground than he usually does, a bit of that up forward. But there's just times where you look at Hugh and you shake your head and you think, God, if only you could get an engine that would let you do that, for 120 minutes.
He'll have a big engine next year, though, with another proper pre-season in him.
I hope he works on speed. He needs a little bit more speed.
Yeah, but overall, he's still a great acquisition, Nicky, and Phoenix's point's valid. If you keep the guy on for 85-90% of the game, getting his engine that big, because he can win hard balls, he can win high balls, he's a very good tackler. He doesn't do much wrong.
I think we missed Seedsman. D-Mac gave us his usual 16 possessions, and no, I'm not being silly, because I thought that D-Mac got absolutely towed up by Pollock early. Pollock just absolutely ran rings around him on that outer wing, and I don't know whether Seedsman would have had the same issues with Pollock. And look, D-Mac laced out a couple of nice passes and did a couple of nice things, which is what David always does. Went at 81% disposal efficiency, but I can't see David as a permanent 22 or a first 22 pick now. I think Seedsman definitely gets picked ahead of him.
Easily. I think it was only because Kelly deserved to be dropped. He kind of hasn't been playing well. We'd lost Seedsman. We needed some quality to come in who was going to do that. We just needed some outside
pace, didn't we? So, yeah. And Kelly's not that.
I do have to actually commend him. And yeah, I've seen somebody say, well, those last 2 minutes or whatever, what did McKay do? He just fell over. Well, no, what he actually did was, when that ball was on the outer wing, he actually put his body into Farrell and bumped Farrell out of the way. So Farrell couldn't get to the ball before it goes out. And it was actually quite a smart play to do. It doesn't show up on any of the stats, but it was a way to keep that possession, and because we had been winning the clearances so well, it was giving us a chance instead of them getting a free ball and running it into their forward line. So whilst people go, oh, it's D-Mac, he's just falling over once again, it's like, no, actually look at what he did.
Yeah, I know.
It was actually a team play.
Yeah, and you'll get that from David because he's a team player. But I just think the quality might have surpassed him now with a couple of additions, and depending on what we do at draft at the end of the year, I can see David slowly slipping out of best 22, and that's probably the way it should be. And he's had,
Is this the last year of his 4-year contract?
I believe it is, yeah. He'll get kept on.
He's a free agent.
Yeah, he won't move. He'll get kept on. They'll probably, but I doubt whether they'll keep him on in the same capacity. And I don't think David's the type that would probably garner a lot of interest from other clubs because there's probably a lot of players in the pool that are like him, and you probably prefer to have a young lad coming through rather than have someone like D-Mac on your list. Riley Knight, still low numbers. I didn't think he was quite as influential, although I did think that he quelled Polick when he moved on him, and I think at times he spent some time running with Ollie Wines as well, so probably a more defensive game from Riley, but we just love his intensity and what he brings to the side. And what we didn't see this week, and maybe that was with the inclusion of Ellis Yeoman, was we didn't see him under pack so much, getting sucked into the play.
Yeah, I thought overall he's not frightened to have a crack for the hard ball, and he doesn't let his man have a lot of latitude. I thought he played a pretty reasonable game.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I love him. Love having him in the side because of the type of player that he is.
Yep, don't disagree with that at all. Look, it was good to see Brody back. I thought he struggled with the pace, but he didn't look to be favouring his knee at all. He looked to still have his his turn of speed. So
a little bit off of trying to, some of the punches and the taps. It was just that little tiny bit off.
And I think he was trying really, really hard as well. He's very enthusiastic, and I think there's times where you can over-try.
When you
what's wrong with our connection tonight? You guys dropping in and out sometimes. Keep going.
And to come up first up into a game of this quality, and it's as good a game that you'll play in terms of hardness and quality.
Yeah.
So I thought he struggled a little bit at first, and he got a little bit better as the game went on. And next week he'll be better again.
Yep, and
nice handball to Sloaney.
The encouraging thing was he spent 78% of the time on ground, which is a fantastic number for a bloke who's been out for a year and had a couple of games back. So all goes well for Smithers, and hopefully he can get some good run back into his legs and hit the ground running again next season. Eddie continues to struggle. He's having an almost season this year, but a critical goal late. I think
Eddie's almost season is still quite a bit better than a lot of other forward pockets.
Well, yeah. Go on, mate.
There's an incredibly high standard he's been playing at for a number of years.
Well, that's true, but he's nowhere near that at the moment.
No, he's not, and he's actually burning opportunities from set shots. And as I say, I guess everybody goes through it at some stage or other, but he's got the yips on set shots at the moment, and I think that is sort of flowing into his whole game a little bit. When he's got a snap where he hasn't got time to think about it, he's got a much better chance of kicking the goal, but just at the moment, he's just not on.
I think in a game where we had 19 tackles inside 50, the fact that Eddie only had 2 of those is probably the most indicative stat of where he's at the moment with his game. Because the one thing that you want out of your small forward when they're not hitting the scoreboard is defensive pressure, and it's one thing I guess I haven't noticed as much this year from Eddie is that defensive pressure, and when we're not getting the output from him on the scoreboard, you want to have some output defensively, and I hope it's just one of those seasons for Eddie. I feel like he's still got a lot to give, and I do agree with you, Macca. He's going to have to sort that goal-kicking issue out, because I don't think he's going to get as many chances over the last couple of years of his career that he's had previously, and for that reason he needs to make the most of the ones he's got. But only went at 33% disposal efficiency. Played up the ground a little bit at times, which I don't mind, but only 4 score involvements as well, which is reasonably low by his standards. So anyway, probably a watching brief on Eddie for the remainder of the season. And same with Tex. I felt Tex tried really hard to impose himself on the game, and it just wasn't bloody happening for him. He still took 7 marks, but he only had
nice
the 10
contested marks.
Yeah, a couple of nice contested marks. Only had the 10 touches, 2 tackles, 3 inside 50s, 7 contested possessions, only went at 60% disposal efficiency, and only gained us 200 metres. He was played deep for periods of the game, and then they sort of released him higher up, which I felt he was more effective when he was released higher up.
He looked to be moving a lot better, though.
He did, but he just... I don't think the way that we're moving the ball at the moment actually suits Tex or McGovern when McGovern's in the team. This desire from us when we get behind to want to possess the ball means that it just leads to a clogged up forward 50. And if you look at over the last month, the difference between how our forward 50 looks and what the opposition's forward 50 looks, it's like chalk and cheese. You know, our forward 50 is always so crowded, and that's just not the kind of area that Tex is going to dominate in. So I think it's going to have to be a really big focus of our off-season is to address not only how we move the ball inside forward 50, but how we structure up when we're trying to play that possession game.
Can't argue with that.
Galuch was good in patches. He's still a young lad, obviously, but I tell you what, when Galucci's around the play, you can trust him. He always puts his body in. He took a couple of massive hits. I think Power Pepper was one. I reckon another one might have been Wines or Boak. I can't quite remember late. But he stayed strong over the ball. And I really have loved seeing what he's got to bring to the table since he's come into the AFL team, and continue to be surprised based on what he was putting up in the SANFL previously.
His last 5 minutes of the game, and when it was clutch time, I thought he was excellent, actually.
Yeah.
He was involved in 2-3 vital plays,
yep,
and which he won, and one of them which led to a goal as well. So I thought the Gooch... he stood up when it was really necessary, right in the crunch time.
Yep, agree.
And we've pointed out early on that we were noticing that, you know, his ability on either side of his foot, they're beautiful passes, and he was still doing that towards the end of the game.
Yep.
And it's just such an advantage to have that in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's going to be a very solid midfielder for us going forward. You know, he seems to be... He looks most likely to be the Richie Douglas heir apparent in that kind of role. Can play a bit forward, can play some really good midfield minutes, and I think you know, he'll probably be that inside-outside player that we'll be looking for, you know, over the next couple of years. And I really like the way he looked. Look, overall, and let's spend a minute just talking about the goal review for a second. I wrote an article on our website, Macca, that I think the easiest way to solve this whole did the ball hit the post kind of goal review situation is just to remove the situation where you have to review it. If it hits the post and goes through the goals, it's a goal. If it hits the post and goes through the points, it's a point. Simple.
I've always thought that 100%. That is exactly what should happen. You just remove that one factor. Yep. It doesn't matter if it's a post, and in any other sport it doesn't matter either.
Exactly, you know,
right. As long as it goes in, and like in soccer, it goes crosses the line.
Yep.
But for me, I'm a big G for as long as it goes through a particular area. It doesn't matter if it nicks the post or not, because it's gone through where it's supposed to go through. Okay. game over.
Well, here's the
And
logic.
what it does is it also takes into account that you've got different size goalposts, you've got different size padding.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
here's the logic, right? When we look at it, the goalpost is just a line, right? It's a vertical line that indicates the point where the scoring area transitions from a goal to a point or out of bounds, right? It's just a line. Now, in every other case on an AFL football field, the ball has to cross the line completely before you get the negative response. So the ball's got to be completely over the boundary line before it's out of bounds, right?
Yep.
If the ball hits the post, it hasn't completely crossed the line, has it? So why are we actually scoring to the negative? It should still be in play. If the ball actually bounces back in, it should be play on. But to my way of thinking, if the ball nicks the post on the way through, that's irrelevant because it actually hasn't crossed completely into the point-scoring zone. And as with every other rule in the game, that's play on. That's like it's logical to do that.
Well, I think it's logical, and actually, I've been an advocate of that for about 3 years because there's always been all these arguments about the cameras and all the rest of it, and is it or isn't it? And just removes the whole argument.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It brings us in line, as you said, with every other professional sporting code on the planet. Like, you can shoot a basketball goal and it can bounce around on the ring for half an hour and go in and it's a goal. You can shoot a soccer goal or a hockey goal and it can go in off the bloody crossbar or the side poles and it's a goal. Rugby league's the same. NFL's the same. We are the only sport on the planet that brings the post into play in terms of how we score the game. And I think it's a complexity that we don't need, and it actually contradicts the other rules. And we're still going to have a need for goal line reviews because there's, you need the goal line and then whether it's touched and all the rest of it. But to my way of thinking, whether it hit the post is probably the hardest thing to get right from a technology point of view. So the easiest way to solve it and to bring about some consistency is just treat it as a line, and if the ball nicks the post on the way through, who gives a damn?
The other thing, just about speaking about this particular goal, if the umpire, the third umpire, had said umpire's call, there would have been no fuss whatsoever. Just because he said put up goal instead of umpire's call, then JJ then said he thinks that it hit the post. I don't think anybody knows for certain whether it did hit the post or not. Yet we've got their coach having a big outpouring on it, saying that the AFL's got a...
I don't know, Hinkley. I have no problem with what Hinkley said.
No, the basis of what he said it was correct, but he was also making it on the one assumption that it did hit the post, and none of us actually know whether it hit the post or not. For certain, no.
Yeah, none of us know, and that's the reason why it wasn't overturned, because it was inconclusive. I think the issue is that we should have had the technology in place to be able to make the right call. The technology needs to be consistent across all grounds, and the camera angles that you get at Etihad are nowhere near what you get at Adelaide Oval. And
that's because the AFL refuses to pay the money to do it.
Exactly.
And makes the local oval, their management committee, they have to put it in.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, AFL, this is your rules. You want it, and you pay for it.
Yeah, and the other thing about the whole thing is, let's, for one wild moment, assume that it did hit the post and incorrectly got called a goal. It's one wrong decision for the whole day. There would have been, with the number of frees paid, 12 and 13, there would have been umpteen frees that could have been paid either way. There would have been frees paid incorrectly either way, and yet we're focusing on this particular one, mainly because JJ made the comment that he did. But by the same token, it's only one of the potential errors for the whole game.
Well,
so I don't think they can't say that one thing cost them the game.
The issue that I did have with Hinkley's presser is the fact that when he was questioned about the impact of Wine's horrific miss, he just said, Ollie made a skill error and, he'll learn from that. Well, I don't think you can actually say that. You can't, on the one hand, brush off a skill error that a player makes and then go hammer and tongs at a goal umpiring decision when the goal umpiring decision was made correctly based on the information that was available. There was nothing incorrect about that process. It was purely that there was not the right camera angle to make any further conclusive call. But Ken Hinckley, I'm not interested in coaches hanging players out to dry, but I think Ken needed to acknowledge the fact that Ollie and also that other lad that sprayed one earlier on in the last quarter, I forget his name. Who was it? Might have been Farrell.
It could have been Farrell, yep.
Who sprayed one. Both of them laying the ball across the boot where they could have kicked drop punts. There's two opportunities. And Port did blow their opportunities in the last quarter through bad skill errors. And, I think Ken went a bit light on Ollie Wines. Ollie Wines is a senior player. He should kick that goal every second, every game, every day of the week. So, we had plenty of chances. He acknowledged rightly that statistically we deserved to win the game. They had their chances to win it. They didn't take advantage of those chances. And I did feel when Ollie missed that shot at goal, I did feel that was the moment that, like, if he'd nailed that goal, that would have been it for us. And when he didn't, I just felt like, that was the opening of the door that we needed to jag it, and that's exactly how it turned out.
Yeah, it was. It was a turning point of the game. Ollie Wines kicks what he should have kicked, and what, 99 times out of 100 you'd expect a player from that range to do a normal drop punt and just kick a goal.
Yep.
And he went with a fancy kick and, put it very bluntly, he effed it.
Yeah, well, he did. He messed it up. All right, well, look, final comments on the game from mine. Mathematically, we're still in it. I don't know whether that actually serves our purpose from a longer term perspective, but it gives the players a reason to get up and try again against GWS next week in the freezing cold on a Saturday night at bloody Monica, which who knows why they scheduled that game on a Saturday night, but anyway. It was nice to see a sustained effort from the Crows, albeit against a team that traditionally we were able to bring that effort with. Yeah,
look, it was a game that deserved to be on at prime time and broadcast across the nation rather than hidden away at 4:40 on Foxtel or 4:10 on Foxtel. It was, I thought, it was an outstanding game to watch, and it's not necessary in the sense of the quality of football, but in terms of the intensity of the effort of both sides, and there was no player taking a backward step. I thought it just was a massive struggle, an intensive struggle, and that's why there were errors in the game. But by the same token, it was interesting to hear the Victorian commentators themselves saying that they'd like to see these games transferred to prime time, and because they do tend to, we have a look at the two showdowns for the year, both decided by less than a goal and with different results each time.
Yep. And we have to move this along because we've gone for an hour and a half again because we just rabbit on like idiots. So let's.
And I've got a few cockwombles.
Yeah. So, well, there's really only one, and I'll reveal that, Nikki, when we get there. But anyway, let's quickly go the breakout award because there were a few eligible players as usual. So WMJ, Tom Diday, does Alex Keith qualify? That's an interesting question. I don't think we've... Alex Keith.
Old.
No.
Too old.
25. No, we're not talking about bloody Rising Star. We're talking about our breakout award, Macca, which is 25 games.
Yeah, he qualifies.
Yeah, Keith qualifies.
So he qualifies. Huey, Jordan and Lockie Murphy. So I think it's probably out of WMJ and Tom Diday, would you think?
Yeah. Honourable mention to Keith.
Yep.
I've only watched 3 quarters, so probably needs to be up to you two guys.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
What?
Dode.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go to Miller.
So shall I tie break this with my only watching the three quarters?
You're going to have to, Nick.
And then I think I'll give it to Junior.
Junior for
as much as I love Tom and how well he's played, I just think that coming back from those fumbles and everything else, continuing to play that way. We had Laird being tagged. He became really integral.
Yep, agree. Let's go to the Jet of the Week award.
You're gonna get what you need. Gonna get what you need. You're gonna get what you need.
I reckon Bryce with an honourable to JJ and Rory Atkins.
Agreed. Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
Too easy. Oh, we have that. Now, do we need a wake-up award this week? I'm not sure. There's probably a couple of blokes that could do with a waking up. So let's see. Tommy Lynch, I reckon.
Yeah.
He looked injured. He couldn't turn.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anybody could be accused of dropping out the game and also not perhaps playing with extreme intensity early on, I think he's the one.
Yeah, there weren't too many others. I mean, Source had an indifferent game, but I didn't think it was terrible. Tex tried. Lockie Murphy had limited opportunities and, young lad, and Tars was injured. So, it's going to have to be
Murphy
Lynchy.
still did some nice proactive stuff when, he got the opportunity, that handball to the Lynchy, even though he missed the goal. That was an awesome handball.
Yeah, he's a hard nut too, Lockie Murphy. I like the look of him.
Wouldn't hurt to give it to Lynchy.
All right, Lynchy it is. Now, Nikki, over to you for the Cockwomble.
There is one that's kind of outstanding that I think at the end of this we might actually decide that probably won the Cockwomble for the year because of a bit of stupidity that was done. And it's only August, but I don't think anybody can top it. But I think we have to kind of give it to a nomination to the Port supporters who think that not only should they see all of the vision for that goal kick that the AFL had decided against, they also need to bring in a Supreme Court injunction so that they can get their 4 points that they deserve.
Yeah, there was actually a petition on change.org as well.
I know.
Jeez.
Oh, seriously? Come on. That's kind of funny. So there is that. I'm actually going to name this person, so I just have to click to the other page. So there's a bloke on Instagram who goes by @DansO'Brien.
Ooh, name and shame.
Well, Tex posted the direct message that was sent to him, which was, "You are the shittiest, C word, please kill yourself." Dan O'Brien, who has 0 followers and 29 posts, apparently gone private very quickly on Instagram, but I think you might want to understand that the South Australian Police might want to have a bit of a chat with you because you kind of can't say things like that. So that's a bit stupid.
Yeah, well, stupid comment from a stupid idiot.
And actually well done on Tex for actually posting that. And, things like that, unfortunately, I think do need to come out.
There's been a lot of stories sorry, Nick, just to interrupt. There's been a lot of stories about fan stalking in American professional sport too, and it's the last thing we need over here, and it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately, but people have just got to grow up a little bit, I think.
Yeah,
if you're not going to say it to somebody directly to their face, you do not post it, even trying to hide behind you do not do it in direct message or even in another one. So that's, don't do that. Kane Corns for just being a numpty, because he is.
Yeah.
But the The ultimate winner,
before-
I think,
before
of the
you-
Cockbubble for the year.
Before you do that climactic one, I'd just like to nominate
Yeah.
CrowCast.
Yeah, what did we do?
Oh, it's a case of what we didn't do. Curtly Hampton retired a couple of weeks ago, and we got so caught up in other stuff that we actually forgot to even mention it, either on this one or, more importantly, on the Tuesday Night Live cast. So we're a bunch of
thought we had-
No, we never did.
Didn't we?
Never
I
did.
thought we had talked about it.
No, we talked about before he retired, about how he didn't look right and all the rest of it, but we didn't
No.
actually acknowledge when Curtly retired, and a lot of us had high hopes for Curtly, and rightly so, because he had spades or oodles of talent, and talent in spades, and it's unfortunate that he's lost the passion, but we do want to recognise that his service to the Crows and wish him all the best for the future, and for that we get a little Cockwomble nomination of our own this week.
Fair enough.
Right,
Now can I have some fun?
Yep, now go for it.
Gil McLaughlin, you wanker.
Hey,
No, sorry, go on there.
have you got footage?
He is the ultimate cockwombling numbnut.
All right.
For somebody who is in charge of a national sporting
Oh, here we go.
organisation.
AFLW.
Well, no, I think it's his lack of knowledge of another sport that is actually one of his main competitors, particularly around attracting juniors to the game in order to grow the game, because a lot of their decisions they make, apparently, we need these kids to be playing the game when they're younger. To him to not understand that the World Cup does not take place over 4 weeks.
No, that's just the finals.
That's just the finals. There's 18 months before that in order to get to the finals.
2 years in some cases.
And so he was completely stupidly oblivious to
He's just an idiot. Well, I mean, what are they doing?
reducing. They're increasing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Gil's just a hollow vessel.
I
And
reckon
somebody
he's
pointed
actually
out-
losing his shit lately. He's
Yeah.
lurching from one crisis to another, and I think he's actually losing a handle on like losing direction. He's just it smacks of bloody a politician trying to desperately hang on to power when his party's going down the toilet. He's just making these snap captain call decisions, and they're all fails.
Yeah, he's got no substance, unfortunately.
I mean, we actually saw with the media about the whole thing about trialing stuff within game, going, but those games, they won't mean anything, kind of forgetting that they actually mean draft positions. It actually has quite a few ramifications. And it also means that there's a lot of teams that might have those teams' actual draft positions. So they could be impacting teams that are higher on the ladder than them by these stupid games which being targeted, and everything. The other thing is that, hilariously, to do with that, they got the media to kind of push that narrative, this is such a great idea. And the huge backlash and outcry from the public made them, they then had to backtrack it again going, actually, no, this is not good. This whole AFLW thing is just another PR nightmare.
Yeah. When he's got Daisy Pearce coming out against him, you've done the wrong thing, because Daisy would toe the line quite readily. So the fact that even she's annoyed probably says quite a bit.
And that's where the growth has. I mean, you just look at South Australia. In 2015, we had 2 divisions with, I think, 10 teams. We now have 6 divisions. We have 2 under 18 divisions. We've got, and I think I'm not sure if it's 1 or 2 under 16 divisions, which is as well. So it's just absolute. The growth in the game is insane, and that's on the back of we're able to see AFLW games, and they want to cut it back even more. It's ridiculous.
I think the thing that everyone takes offence with Gil is he spent 2 years pumping the shit out of AFLW. Right, it was the best thing since sliced bread. It was the biggest growth opportunity. We love to have women involved in the game. Blah 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 blah. And then when it's inconvenient because they have schedules and they want to introduce another team and therefore it's not going to fit, he's quite quick to then go, well, we can do 6 weeks. I mean, the World Cup does it in 4. I mean, it was that dismissive attitude and that lack of consultation, I think. And I think this is probably an area that the AFLW as a collective are going to need to take control of pretty quickly, because there are decisions being made on their competition by another competition. So the AFL will only ever schedule and run AFLW at the convenience of the AFL, and I think at some point there's going to be a need for there to be almost a separate commission for AFLW, and that it actually runs, in conjunction with the AFL, but certainly has the ability to look after its own competition, because I don't reckon the AFL are ever going to look after the AFLW competition, because it's always going to be run at the convenience of the men's competition.
Nicole Livingston I don't think she said peep about any of this, and yet she's apparently the head commission, for the women's side of it in the AFL.
I said, she's been bloody silent.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is when you come out and actually say something. At least the AFLPA has actually come out and said something, and there's so many of the AFLW players just across the league have just gone pretty bunter at the AFL over this. But when he kind of came out and said it, I just wondered whether he was angling for a job at Cricket Australia. Yeah,
well, where did Adrian Anderson go? He went to soccer, so maybe that's why he referred to World Cup. Maybe Gil wants to go to soccer next. We've got to tie it up.
Just one quick cockwomble for today. To Carlton, I think they get a cockwomble because when GWS only had 17 men on the field, GWS still managed to kick a goal, and then they had only 16 men on the field, and they managed to kick 3 points and another goal. Well done, Carlton.
I reckon that's a pretty good spot for us to finish up, because we've gone for a world record 1 hour and 46 minutes, not including the stuff up. Thanks to everyone on the chat. There's 700 comments. Fantastic. Sorry to those who wanted to listen to us on Facebook tonight. We'll fix that up. You can listen to us on demand on Facebook, obviously. Follow us on Twitter, aflcrowcast.com. See you on Tuesday night.
Night all.
Yeah, good night all.